That music means that it's time for us to go to Moscow, to our man in Moscow. John Duggan, good morning to you.
Jaron Owen, how are we doing?
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, good.
What was that game like last night?
It was much better than the first one in terms of atmosphere and drama, but the France-Belgium game was a better footballing game. And I felt England were going to do it for the first half. I thought they should have been further ahead. Of course, they took it to Croatia early on, as we expected, with a lot of pace in the team. And I thought Croatia were sluggish. They were misplacing their passes. It was a great goal to open the scoring from Kieran Trippier. Another set piece. And then Harry Kane and Jesse Lingard had big chances at a World Cup semi-final. You've got to take them. And they started to defend a little bit deeper towards the end of the first half. And then that continued into the second half. When Perisic equalised, the whole thing began to change. I thought, lads, England bottled it. I thought they choked. I thought they suffered under the spotlight of the occasion.
They're not really built to control games, though, if you consider that the central midfielder around whom everything has to work is Jordan Henderson, and his game isn't really changing the pace of the game or controlling it or understanding the ebb and flow of a match. It's like pass the ball sideways or pass the ball backwards and harry and tackle. Like, he's grand to a certain level if Lingard scores and if Harry Kane is scoring. Everything has to be going perfectly to have someone like Jordan Henderson be your linchpin central midfielder. But if you don't have somebody who can control the pace of the game, then you're screwed.
Well, I think they stopped passing the ball, and they'd passed the ball during the tournament, and once they conceded the goal, they started to use Pickford and I don't think even people were like looking for the ball from him actively. And I thought he was rushing, and I thought he started pumping long balls, and which were going nowhere. And then Croatia gained more confidence in the fact that they were able to pass the ball to the field. And the more and more the game went on, I thought they were going to win it in normal time. I thought that you could only see one winner, and Mandzukic got the winner in extra time. But Modric, again, outstanding. I think if there was, even if they lose the final, I think he's probably now the favourite for the Golden Ball. And just the way Brozovic was great in front of the defence, and Perisic just a complete menace all night down his left and England's right hand side. And there was a time like during the later stages of the second half where England were just hanging on for dear life. Walker and Stones. Walker was being exposed. His pace was helping him at times, but then the breather happened. You had the extra time, the breather for extra time. England got a bit of a second wind. Stones had a header cleared off the line by Vashelko. But once again, when Croatia came again, I think you're only going to see one winner. And to me, what I just saw out there was passing the ball and keeping the ball and being comfortable in possession. And I think England, whether they could or not do it, I think they forgot to do it.
I think you're right. And I think as well, that kind of gives the lie to the notion that this is the start of something really special for England, that ultimately they've reached their ceiling in this tournament by virtue of the draw, by virtue of a few players playing well up to this point. But ultimately, unless they actually find a way to control games and to be comfortable in games when the opposition is actually better than them, you're not going to win a tournament. Like Croatia have been able to, in games where they've been trying to dig it out, they've been able to just kind of find pattern of play and pass the ball to each other because they've got that type of midfielder in the team. England, for example, if in the next tournament they get a tougher draw, will come up against Croatia in the round of the last 16 or in the round of the quarterfinals, and they'll have the exact same result, and they'll just blame the players for it. But actually, it's the system, it's the style of play, it's the fact that they're not creating players who can get on the ball in midfield and keep it for long portions of the game, take the sting out of the opposition.
Well, Brazil and Belgium would love to have been on this side of the draw. I think there are some positives for England in this. I think the way they conducted themselves and enjoyed it through the tournament was a good thing. I think it's a lesson for future tournaments that you just need to enjoy it, and you just need to be open and about your strengths and your weaknesses. I thought they were well set up during the tournament, but I think what I saw, and I've only missed one England game, which was the first one against Tunisia. What I saw from England during the tournament was against Tunisia, when they conceded, they reverted into the shell, and then Harry Kane saved them, and Harry Kane didn't have the best of nights last night. Against Colombia, when they conceded, for the first half of that extra time period, they were struggling. And once they conceded again last night, they lost their shape. They lost what they were doing early on. And to me, mentally, they bottled it. They couldn't handle the heat, the pressure. And that gave Croatia confidence to say, we're going to take these guys. We have the ball here now, and we're just going to try and create the space. And the chances will eventually come. And then they came. And Mandzukic, once again, in a big final, he scored in the Champions League final for Bayern Munich and for Juventus. Scores in a big game. Trippier and Walker and Stones all possibly at fault for that. So there's positives to be taken from a pride perspective for England, given the low base they were coming from. But there's a lot of work to be done on the basic techniques of possession, of being comfortable on the ball in these elite matches for future tournaments, and to be able to tactically change things. Should Southgate maybe have changed things tactically, and maybe changed, brought on a second midfielder, holding midfielder, brought on players quicker like Danny Rose, Jamie Vardy. Marcus Rashford didn't really make that much of an impact to me. And so it's a positive tournament in terms of enjoyment, in terms of a bit more pride and a bit more happiness as a nation. But in terms of winning football tournaments, there's still a bit to go for England. As I said yesterday to Owen on World Cup Daily, this might be the beginning of an England graph. They've had under-8 success at 17 and 20 level. This might be the beginning of their graph. It was not going to be the end of their graph. I think that was borne out last night. Croatia hadn't won a knockout game at a major finals in 20 years. So they've had a great run through the tournament themselves since their golden generation of Davor Šuker, Jarni, Prosneski, Zvonimir Boban, 1998, when they played France in the semi-final and lost 2-1. And now, of course, they play in France in their Croatia's first ever final on Sunday in Moscow. And what an amazing story for a country that had a brutal conflict with Serbia in the early 90s. Luka Modric's grandfather, one of the victims of that, and they've had a lot of hardship in Croatia. And I think they're a very passionate country, and they're going to enjoy the next few days.
Just one other thing on the England and their choking last night, because there is no question that they completely bottled it, and we know why that happened on the pitch. We know the players that allowed Croatia to make it seem thus. But why did England collapse mentally? Because if you compare the first half to the second half and to extra time, they clearly had enough in their squad to be able to control the ball a little bit better. So there was a mental lapse there, John, and I'm a little bit surprised that it did happen. Like, is it down to youth alone, or is it down to potentially just a lack of situational awareness?
I would say it's situational awareness. I'd say it's the stage that they're on. Your heads are up, you score. You've got plenty of chances to make it 2 or 3-0. You don't. And in all sports, it's like in all sports, pressure comes on, and it's how you deal with the pressure. And England these players have never been in this situation before. And once Croatia equalised, and then they nearly scored, Perisic nearly scored again. England were they just froze in the situation. But we'd seen little signs of it before in the tournament. Like, if Pickford hadn't saved those Berg efforts against Sweden, would England have retreated then? So I think it's a lack of awareness of what to do in these situations in a big tournament. And that's why you have players like Luka Modric and Ivan Rakitic, who have this experience at Champions League level in the deep stages of the Champions League, might be better equipped to handle that than England were last night.
What was the pre-match and atmosphere during the game like, and post-match? Did you see anything around? Were there much more English fans there? Obviously, Moscow's much easier to get to than where the quarter-final was, and we generally expected that there would be a slightly more well-heeled English fan there last night.
Well, I was delighted to see a much better atmosphere than I did on Tuesday in St. Petersburg for France-Belgium. Went down to the Luzhniki Metro before the game. Croatian and English fans mingling. French fans came out of a hotel from nowhere, and it was "Who the hell are you?" and it was "Go back to Paris," and they just started lapping it up. And then they all started singing La Marseillaise, which was quite funny. English fans, I wouldn't say they were well heeled. They were middle of the road. They were doing this Southgate song. Remember when the first time we met? Southgate, you're the one, you still turn us on, football's coming home again, and obviously it's not. But they were even singing that on the metro back from the stadium afterwards, and they were defiant. I found that the England fans were defiant and still happy despite their defeat, banging the doors of the metro and generally making a lot of noise, but in a positive way. And the Croatian fans and England fans mingled before the game. Great atmosphere inside the stadium. Felt like a World Cup semi-final. Felt like a real tense cauldron. and both teams, let the blood, sweat, and tears go out of themselves. So, but Croatia, it was beautiful to see. I think some of their children coming on and hitting the ball into the net, and some players there that have had issues, Modric and Lovren, who've had issues with a perjury trial back in their own country, and Croatia, who've been a team that on a good day can beat anybody, but on a bad day cannot even get out of a group, which they didn't in Brazil, are now in a final. Quite remarkable. And I still say France are strong favourites, but it is a final, and finals can conjure strange things.
Remember back in 2012, we were like, what we'll do is we'll do Croatia in the first game, and then we'll get a draw against Italy, and then Spain will beat us and we'll get out of the group. And it was like, well, Croatia are pretty good. Ireland not so good.
This Croatia team, as John just said there, has underachieved massively. And it's not just the scope of the last 20 years. It is, like Ger says there, like this decade. I mean, 2012, from a Croatian perspective, is viewed as an underachievement. Like it probably is, John.
Yeah, the last couple of decades have been an underachievement. Dalic just came in once again. The previous coach was sacked before the playoff against Ukraine. Shacked up. They won the match. They haven't been practicing penalties, but they do have a steel about them. And they've got, I think, once again, Brozovic was excellent last night as a shield. They have talented players in the team. Perisic plays for Inter Milan. You've got obviously the Barcelona, Real Madrid players. Mandzukic has been a top player at top clubs for the last few seasons. Dejan Lovren, of course, Liverpool fans would know that the goalkeeper was a hero against Denmark. So they're a good footballing team. For a country the size of ours, that's pretty impressive. And for a country that I think for a long time their biggest well-known world star was Goran Ivanisevic. So they've done well in the last 25 years since they came on the football scene as an independent nation. And I think they're going to be tired though, and I think France tactically need to get after Croatia early on in the final, because I think that if they do, they'll win it comfortably.
Yeah, a lot of people were suggesting that Croatia would be pretty tired after back-to-back games going to penalties. They've now had 3 successive games go to extra time, and yet conditioning doesn't seem to be an issue for them. They seem to be going great guns towards the end of the game last night.
Yes, I think that can be the ebb and flow of adrenaline, and it can be the confidence of equalising and feeling that you're about to win the game. And I think these things, I think it goes in waves in terms of the conditioning. But France have been an extra day. I think France's midfield will cope with Croatia's midfield a lot better on Sunday. And a special all-European final, of course. And I think this is the 21st World Cup final. Pretty novel pairing. Don't think it's the pairing we expected. I'd love to have seen the odds in a France-Croatia final before the game, but Modric was just running the show at one stage last night. I don't think Dele Alli was picking him up quite a lot earlier on, but by the time it got to later on in the match, Modric was very much conducting the orchestra, as it were, in terms of the tempo of the game. And I don't think that'll happen on Sunday. And I expect France to be crowned world champions. I think France, as I said, are on their graph. There are teams that have done admirably, like Croatia have done, like Czechoslovakia, Sweden, in past World Cups and reached finals. I would have said that the Netherlands team in 2010 was a very ordinary team that reached a final. You can even say that Argentina's team, Messi aside, 4 years ago, was a relatively ordinary team. I'm not trying to in any way kind of take away from Croatia's achievement last night, but they played Denmark, Russia and England to get to a mess of an Argentina team to get to a World Cup final. So you could argue that Croatia have also had the benefit of the draw a little bit as well in this World Cup.
Yeah, okay. So what do you expect from the final few days in Moscow, John?
Well, obviously we'll see the influx of French and Croatian fans. I mean, there was a good Croatian attendance last night, better than the French on Tuesday. I'd hope to see a lot more French fans coming here. A lot of neutrals again last night. A huge amount of Russians in the fans, unceremoniously booing Domagoj Vida every time he got the ball, which was quite an insight. And then obviously is the corporate interest in the World Cup final, because it's the hottest ticket, isn't it, in world sport, one of them. So obviously be interested to see what Deschamps and Dalic are going to say in the next few days, the build up to the game itself, and see what the sights and sounds of Moscow are like, and how Moscow will continue, because I felt in the last few days, or when I've come back here, that life is getting back a little bit to normal. You're not seeing as much colour on the metro. You're not seeing much colour around the town. I went down to Red Square yesterday. Didn't see that much going on. it was the same in St. Petersburg on Tuesday. So there's a little bit of a fin de siècle feel about the situation now, and there's only one game of 64 to play in this what's been an amazing World Cup. So hopefully now there'll be a bit of life around the city and a good denouement to the tournament, to use a French phrase, when France play Croatia.
And a chance for you to get out and see a bit more of the city and see some of the sights. Anything in particular that's on your list?
I want to get into that Kremlin Palace, lads. You actually can get into it and see what's around, and I want to see Lenin's tomb if possible. There's a palace down as well in the south of the city, which I'd like to do. And I think we've spoken about this. You did see that I ate the meal. I went on assignment and ate that meal.
What was it like?
It was heavy, that's what I would say. On the edge of stodgy. I know what they do now. I think that's how they get through the winters. Having those meals. So I just said, I want everything Russian on the menu. I went to this place called Cafe Pushkin, which is probably the most famous, traditional, beautifully designed eatery in Moscow, and had borscht, which is a kind of a beetroot soup, had a little venison pie, and then they had, an assortment of Russian dishes for the main, which is beef stroganoff, a kind of a veal risole, some kind of veal wrapped in batter, dumplings, meat dumplings, and then they kind of pickles in a piece of pastry and a mushroom. So some of it I didn't eat. The dessert was a kind of like a coffee or a custard slice you get at a Calmore Cafe in Dublin. It was a bit like that. It was called a Napoleon Meat Whey. And then they had to drink, because I'm not drinking, they had a non-alcoholic mule, and then they had this thing called kvass, which is a drink made of rye bread, which kind of smells like Belgian beer and kind of tastes tasteless. But look, it's stuff for the winters. It's stuff for the winters to get you through the cold. But don't think I'll be repeating it, but it was a good thing to experience.
Something to be endured as opposed to enjoyed.
Exactly, endured. I was enduring it a bit, and it cost €70. So I don't think I'll be repeating it today. But yeah, it'll be good to see the sights and sounds, and maybe have a glass of vodka when it's all over.
Well, enjoy. John, great stuff. Thanks very much.
All right, Jaron, Owen, take care.
Undoubtedly one of our highlights of the World Cup has been the constant dispatches from Moscow, and all over indeed, coming from John Duggan, and you should follow him on Twitter for a look back on some of the stuff as we've enjoyed it across the course of the tournament.